AlbionVC. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Parry Malm, CEO and founder of Phrasee. Phrasee is a company that is the leader in brand language optimization, working with companies and brands such as Domino's, eBay, Farfetch, Groupon, Walgreens, and a number of others. Today, over 1 billion people across the continents have responded to Phrasee-generated language content. Phrasee has just announced that it's closed a large growth round with participation with Capital D, Morgan Stanley Expansion Capital, and Keyhaven Capital Partners. So congratulations, Parry, on closing that round.
Thanks.
Now, I've known you, Parry, for about 4 years, since AlbionVC led the Series A round back in 2018. And I've been privileged in witnessing the speed of growth that Phrasee has experienced, and the successes you've had in the last 4 years. I'd very much like to explore this with you in our conversation, and also to explore how you have grown as a CEO and a founder of a company since that period, and even taking it back from the very beginning.
Let's do it. Let's give her. Thanks for having me.
Shall I just pass on to you to say a few words by way of introduction and introduce Phrasee in a way that's probably better than what I just did?
Sure. Well, I'm Parry, CEO of Phrasee, and Phrasee, we started on February 23rd, 2015 with a simple concept that people were not saying it right. People spent so much time, millions and millions of dollars sending out millions and millions of marketing campaigns to millions and millions of people. And they thought that they were doing it as efficiently as possible. And no one ever stopped to think, what if the message was no good? Now, my background is as a brand side marketer, and I spent the bulk of my career sending out millions of messages to millions of people. And I always thought, but what if our message sucks? And I looked around the marketplace. There's no technology out there that could actually help people craft a better, more effective message. So we built it. And in the 7 years since we launched, we work with a who's who of brands throughout the world, across primarily Europe and the US. And we're very fortunate to be in a position to have closed such a substantial financing round just 7 years into what has been a pretty whirlwind of a journey.
Yes, that's been absolutely amazing. Did you ever have any doubts when you set up the company that it's going to fly? Did you have any doubts about the market? I mean, what you're doing is quite novel. I don't think many people have done it before you. So give us a little bit more color around that journey.
Well, look, I mean, if someone ever starts a company and tells you they don't have a shred of doubt that it's not going to work out, then they're probably a big fat stinking liar. Of course we had doubts, especially because we were moving into a marketplace that didn't exist. Now, the thing is, we had done homework. I knew from firsthand experience that there is a need for the problem we were trying to solve in the marketplace. I think there are some uncertainties around the technology, and there are some uncertainties around the readiness of the market itself. And as the years have gone on, we've had blips, and there have been, those existentially challenging moments where you're lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, going, are we going to be able to make payroll next month? Fortunately, we've not had moments like that for a fair few years. And do I have doubts now? I still have doubts about things, but now it's more doubts about what should we optimize next, and what part of our business operations need to be focused on next, not the sort of existential torment that you face in the early years.
And if you look back to the early years, kind of the first couple of years after you set up the business, what do you think was the hardest thing to do?
Oh boy, the hardest thing to do. I think the hardest thing to do was to be able to just carry on when it seems like everything was going against us, where you sometimes have those weeks, those months, those quarters where just nothing seems to go right. Things are moving slowly, and you just go, am I doing the right thing? Should I just wrap up and go and get a real job, right? And just being able to carry on and persevere and sort of just not give up can be very challenging at times, when the easy route would be to go and get a job.
And then you had some amazing success quite early on in the development of the company of actually signing up some very, very important clients and large clients. Was that the moment when you thought, things are really starting to scale up now, things are really starting to take off? Or was it a more gradual expansion in those early years before you raised your Series A round?
Well, in our early years, it was February the 24th, 2016, that I really believed the company was going to make it. So we founded on February the 23rd, 2015. We've been going for a year at that point. And each year prior to COVID, we used to throw massive birthday parties every year. And the first year, it wasn't massive. I say massive, there's like 30 people there, right? And we didn't know at that point if we could carry on. We didn't really have any customers of note. We had a product, but we didn't really have like a very big team at that point. And we thought, well, you know what? If we're going to go down, let's go down with a massive party. So we did that. And I got home around midnight or so, and I fell asleep. And I woke up at about 6 a.m, maybe with a little bit of a headache. And I looked at my email first thing, and in there was a signed contract from a huge global brand that came in at 12:23 a.m., 23 minutes into our second year. It was our first big contract that not only kept our lights on for a long time, but started us down the road of a true partnership with this customer for years and years and years. And that's when the light bulb really went on, that what we're doing is purpose built to help large enterprises transform their marketing operations. Of course, there have been ups and downs since then, but that was the one seminal moment that I think of when I realized that we were onto something special here.
Yeah. Hence, we've remembered the date very well.
And the time.
Yes, indeed. So I met you probably about 2 years after that, when you were out to raise your Series A, which we were fortunate enough, AlbionVC, to lead. At the time, you had about 25 people in the company, I think, from memory. You are now well over 100. Could you tell us a little bit about that journey, how it went, what were the key challenges around that?
Well, if there's one thing that I've learned in the last 7 years, it doesn't matter how fancy your technology is. It doesn't matter how fast it runs. If you don't have the right people doing it, then nothing else matters. And that's the big lesson in the last 7 years. Anyone can build technology, but very few people are able to build and motivate a killer team. And we've been super fortunate that some of our very early hires were such extreme cultural fits. And they actually developed the culture with us, where now we're able to attract lots and lots more excellent people. It's not been without its challenges. I mean, in 2018, I think it was, we set up shop in the US in a fancy office in the Bay, and that lasted about 6 months, and it was an absolute catastrophic failure. And it wasn't because of the people; it was because we just weren't ready for it. So what's cool though is that we sort of came back home, we licked our wounds, and said, well, that didn't quite go as planned. And then when we launched into the US the second time, it went extremely well. And in the last 18 months, we've gone from 1 head in the US to 40 heads. And our book out there is more than doubling year on year. And I think that is probably one of the key challenges that companies, particularly in the UK, face, because the US is just a huge, homogenous, affluent market. And the dream is to make it big there. But actually doing it, there are many pitfalls, many of which we've experienced.
So your first attempt wasn't successful. What went wrong with your thing, and what did you actually change in the second time around? Because obviously you got a lot of traction very quickly once you got back there again.
Yeah, I think we followed the Field of Dreams playbook the first time. If you build it, they will come. So we built it, but they didn't come. We moved into the most expensive city in the country. 8 time zones away from HQ, and just basically, if I think back about it now, I'm like, what were we thinking? But you don't know what you don't know. What we did differently this time is we focused on selling into the US from the UK. And of course, in the textbooks, you're told you shouldn't do that. You need to be in market and blah. But our experience was quite different. We actually achieved significant success selling in from here. And then once we had, those lessons, the commercial lessons learned about what it takes to sell and service in the US, we then put people on the ground to then extend that out further. So I guess the lesson for me was don't listen to what you're supposed to do. Just do what's right for your company. And if we were a different company, maybe our first method of building it and hoping it comes would have worked. It just didn't work for Phrasee.
And looking back at, you mentioned the importance of people, and especially the kind of senior people in the first, your first few hires, and how important they are for the culture of the place. What do you think was the most important hire that you've made back in those early days?
Oh boy, I probably couldn't put it down to one single hire, but I think one thing that has really helped us create the kind of culture, which I'm very, very proud of, is we hired a lot of people who are very junior in their careers who didn't have direct transferable experience into Phrasee's sector. I think that in the tech sectors particularly, there's a real sort of space race for experienced talent. And what this does is it means that, those experienced people can be very, very scarce. And they often come with baggage from other startups, some of which are on varying scales of dysfunctionality. What we found is hiring people early in their careers who could come in, who were whip smart, ambitious, and passionate, who could come in and really sort of forge a culture for us. And I think those are the hires that I'm most proud of, many of whom are still with us now. I think making a senior experienced hire in many ways is lower risk because they've got more of a track record and that's sort of more of a known quantity. But bringing in people who just become part of the inner workings of Phrasee, who are the blood flowing through our veins, who have become absolute sort of cultural ambassadors for Phrasee as their careers have moved on, has been absolutely paramount for us.
And I think you've consciously looked to hire from a very diverse pool of people. I think in a recent blog post you mentioned that Phrasee had approximately 50% of women on the team, which is a very high proportion in tech from what I have seen. How have you been able to achieve that? How have you made Phrasee a good place to work for talented people of diversity, of diverse backgrounds?
Yeah, so if I'm perfectly honest, we actually have never set out to do that. It's never been a strategy of Phrasee's to go like, let's hire a bunch of diverse people and blah, blah, blah. I mean, we've always said from day one, let's hire the best people who will get the best possible results for us. It so happens that many of them happen to be women. Many of them come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, sexual orientations, you name it. But it's never been a real strategy of ours. But I think the reason why we get a disproportionately high level of applications of people from diverse backgrounds across all sorts of categories. Number one, we've got visible leadership from many different areas, genders, races, all that kind of stuff, right? Like one of my two co-founders, Victoria, is a woman. By having a prominent woman in a leadership role from the inception of the company, removes any sort of perceived patriarchy that people perceive to exist in many companies of Phrasee's ilk. I think also, since we've got a reasonably young workforce, I think more than half the workforce is below 30, there are a certain set of values which that generation have, which has become ingrained in Phrasee's culture also. And from what I've observed of the folk we've hired in that cohort, they tend to be much more focused on inclusivity, removing bias, things like that. And the culture and the sort of diverse breakdown has grown organically, not strategically, but it has become one of our core strategic assets.
Yeah, and from what I've seen, kind of working with you over the last 4 years or so, the culture is very strong, and you can see it across. Not just speaking to the people, but actually the communications you put out, the way the Phrasee is seen out there in the market. What do you think are the key pillars of that culture? How would you describe it to somebody who comes to us and says, "Why is Phrasee so great culturally and attracts such great people?"
That is a tough question, and if I knew, then I would write a book about it and become a billionaire. I think part of it is like especially in B2B technology, people take themselves very seriously, and people have this perception that every buyer is fundamentally rational because you're selling from company to company, and so they basically think that everything you do needs to be 100% rational. But they don't realize that people on the buyer side are human beings just like us, and they all have wants, needs, emotional responses to various things. So I think, by us actually treating our customers like humans and not like sort of Mr. Spock, it gives us a sort of perception in the marketplace that's very positive for us. I think secondly, the majority of marketing that B2B technologies put out is just incredibly boring. Just like you could basically copy and paste any company's name into a white paper and you wouldn't be able to tell if it was from company X or company Y. And we said from day one, we may be a lot of things, but we're never going to be boring. So we still tell dumb jokes, and we still and we still, like do things that companies like us aren't supposed to do, and that creates a air of excitement about Phrasee, that we're different and we're memorable, and it differentiates us from generic companies A, B, and C. Is it the way that Phrasee will be forever? I mean, as our scale changes, our tone of voice needs to change, our general perception needs to change. But we've always said our core brand idea is to be awesome at every touch point, and you can't be awesome without having a laugh once in a while.
Yeah, and I receive a lot of communications from various companies I've been in touch with over the years, and I have to say that the Phrasee newsletter that hits my inbox once a week is the funniest and most amusing piece of communication I get from any company out there. So if anybody wants to go and get the Phrasee newsletter, they should subscribe and get a few laughs once a week, every week. It's great fun. And a lot of stuff there's from The Simpsons. What is the obsession with The Simpsons? Why The Simpsons?
So, growing up on the mean streets of Canada, after school, every day at 5 o'clock and 5:30, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation would show Simpsons reruns. So growing up, I used to watch The Simpsons twice a day, most days after school. And so, it just became ingrained in me, like Simpsons jokes, like Simpsons references. And me and all my buddies, we all make, still, I was on Twitter with my best friend a couple of days ago, and we were making jokes about Simpsons episodes from 30 years ago, which maybe shows our age more than much else, but we still think it's funny, right? Anyways, our very first hire, and now our VP of product, Jasper, in Australia, actually had a parallel experience growing up where he used to watch The Simpsons after school every day also, and has all the episodes memorized. So me and him formed this sort of fast Simpsons bond, and we would be in the office when there's only 6 or 7 of us, and we'd make sort of these arcane Simpsons jokes that nobody else would get, and we'd be busting our guts laughing. Anyways, we as the company matured a little bit more, we had all sorts of different technology pieces, and we would talk about them in technological senses, and we realized that was actually quite exclusionary for those who didn't know about technology, didn't know a API from a SQL, from all these various acronyms. So what we decided to do was to animate these technological concepts with allegorical Simpsons characters. Because what that did is it made it more accessible to non-technology experts. So a few examples here is we have, let me think here. We have Bumblebee Man, who is our deep learning engine, who says, "Ay, ay, ay, that is good language," right? We have, I'm trying to think of more. There's so many of them now. My all-time favorite, actually, we've created quite a comprehensive suite of APIs, which is technology that talks from one software to a different one. And we originally called it Flanders. The reason being is Flanders, of course, Homer's neighbor. You don't always like your neighbor Homer, but you got to be nice to him. So we always said our APIs should go hi-dly-ho, Mr. Third-party tech. After a couple of years, Flanders we needed to deprecate because we needed to modernize our API suite and whatnot. So we called it Rod and Todd, which are Flanders' kids. But it's a massive joke. and it's cute and it's funny and stuff, but there is actually a method to the madness, because by making technology accessible, it means that you don't have this sort of cabal of black hoodie wearing computer scientists who talk in jargon. It means that everybody is on a level playing field, which I think adds to our sort of culture of inclusivity.
Let's talk a little bit more about your own personal journey through as you were building Phrasee from the early days. I know that just after we invested at Series A, you got married, you started a family, so you had all of the pressures that come with that alongside building the business, growing the business, hiring lots of people, making them all productive. How did you manage to balance family life, husband life with all the pressures of the business? And what are the kind of lessons that you'd like to pass on to young entrepreneurs who are starting on that journey now?
Well, so when I started Phrasee, I had split up with my first wife about a year and a half previously. So I was in a bit of a down patch, right? Mm-hmm. But the thing is, life moves quickly, and I moved on from being bummed out about that to putting all of my time and energy into Phrasee, which for Phrasee was absolutely right for its first few years. With me being basically having no life and doing nothing but Phrasee was very good for it. But then it stopped being good, right? Because you cannot scale a company if you're too involved in everything. It frustrates people, and it just makes you unnecessarily stressed out. So I got married, had my first son, then my second one, and actually for Phrasee it's been a great thing. For me, of course, it's been a great thing, but for Phrasee it's been an absolutely great thing, because it made me realize that like Phrasee's cool in that, and I'm super proud of it, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just one of many things which matter to me, and it's given me a level of perspective which I didn't have previously, and so now if I clock off at 5:00 and I do bedtime and stuff like that, it's okay. Whereas previously, prior to kids, prior to getting married again and stuff like that, I probably would have been going till 10:00, 12:00 at night and working myself into an early grave. I'm certainly not saying if you're a entrepreneur, go and have kids. Make sure you do it with the right person. Make sure you do it, at the right time. But in no way does it become detrimental to your focus on the business. If anything, it puts it in perspective and lets you know that business just is business. It's not that important. Mm.
So in the early days, you're all involved, as most people are, kind of doing everything, really. Everybody's doing everything when you're a few people in the team. And then as the team starts growing, you realize that doesn't scale. So how did you evolve your own leadership style through that journey? How have you changed as a leader and a CEO from the days when you're just a few of you to now?
Oh boy, well, I mean, I think you can probably comment on that more than me, to be honest. I think certainly what I've learned throughout the years, I like being busy. I like knowing what's going on. I'm a sort of information sponge. I like knowing everything about everything. And actually, that was good for a while, and then it started to hold me back, because you can't know everything about everything when the company scales, when you've got, dozens and dozens of customers, employees, and, bills to pay and stuff like that. So I think, letting go of stuff, and also realizing that if somebody did something that wasn't optimal, then I used to get so annoyed about it. And now I'm like, it's okay. It would need to be a pretty big screw up for it to be existentially important to Phrasee. And if you don't let people, make a mistake once in a while, then they'll never learn to not do it again. And you turn into this sort of quality assurance crutch for them. And that doesn't scale either.
Yeah.
So I think, there's been an element of letting go. I mean, one area, when we signed our Series A investors agreement with Albion, there were 2 clauses in there which I thought were stupid at the time, but wound up being quite good clauses. And one was that we had to hire a CFO, and the second one was we had to hire a chairman. Now, as you will recall, I sort of fought them and delayed them and slow played them for as long as was humanly possible, because I thought, who's this guy telling me how to run my company? I'm the best at everything I do. I know everything, blah, blah, blah. But I finally listened, and when we brought in a CFO and subsequently brought in a chairman, it was actually a huge boost to us to be able to surround yourself with experienced people who can look at things from a different viewpoint than you've got currently, either with more experience or different skill sets, is hugely powerful. So yeah, that was a real lesson to me.
I'm glad that we've done something that kind of added some value to the journey that you're on. Can we talk a little bit about your views on the ethics of machine learning and AI? One of the things that Phrasee did quite early on was actually to put in place a ethical AI policy, and this was driven primarily by you and your thinking on what AI should be and shouldn't be. So, do you mind just spending a few minutes describing your views on what good AI looks like and what AI shouldn't be used for?
Sure. Well, my broad view on that is it's short-sighted to try to ascribe ubiquitous ethical values on AI, right? It's just like the challenge with that is it assumes that all AI has the exact same purpose. But if we think about it, what AI is effectively doing is it's trying to do tasks that were previously done by humans using machines. Now, humans, there's if we do something wrong, then there are clear liabilities, both civil and criminal, for doing wrong. If a doctor misdiagnoses someone, then there's malpractice stuff there. If a marketing company misuses data, there's GDPR and all that stuff, right? From my standpoint, the people who own and create AI should be held vicariously liable in the same way that humans would be if they were acting in that way. So from Phrasee's standpoint, what we do is we ultimately optimize marketing language, and we have access to various data points and various methodologies which could be used for spurious means. Somebody could use Phrasee's technology to convince them to vote in a certain way, or convince them to buy guns, to gamble, to do things like that. And we believe that if it was a human being put in that standpoint, then it would be morally questionable for that human to be doing those tasks, and therefore it would be morally questionable for Phrasee to use technology pointed at those problems also. So that's why I think it was in 2018 or 2019, we were one of the first pure play AI companies in the world to make public our AI ethics policy, where we stated exactly what we will and won't do with our technology. It's particularly specific to the domain in which Phrasee operates, and I think it is a bit grandiose for someone like me to impose my views on AI in general, or on people using AI in different circumstances. But we've had codes of laws for millennia now. So why should AI be held to any account less than what humans are held to? And that's my main view.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So what's next for Phrasee? You've got extra capital now. You're growing very, very fast. Where are you taking the business from here?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And we have so many options. The hard thing when you're a small company is you don't have options. You can't place many bets. You can't take many risks. You need to make one choice, and you just need to hope that it's the right choice. And we're very fortunate to have reached a significant scale now where we have optionality. And when you have optionality, you can do so much more and stress so much less. So realistically, we are placing bets on a whole bunch of new products. The new products are going to be taking some of the core IP that Phrasee has built throughout the years and applying it in new use cases. And that's actually very, very exciting. We're also enhancing our IP to handle a whole bunch of use cases in the existing areas which we work currently. I'm very, very bullish and excited about those things. Some will work and some won't. And that's okay because we have optionality. I think we're going to have continued geographic expansion. I think the growth areas for Phrasee, both in Europe, stateside, APAC, LATAM, many more places, the market has finally caught up to where Phrasee is, and they're ready for us. We're going to be expanding even further. And then I think one really important thing is that we're in the next few months, hopefully, going to throw one hell of a birthday party, because we ain't had one in a few years, and it's very important to us that we continue to celebrate Phrasee as it gets older and older and older. Because if you're not having fun, then what's the point?
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to receiving the invitation, Parry.
I didn't say you were invited, so.
Just before we go then, one final question for you. What are the kind of 3 key pieces of advice you give somebody who is currently raising Series A and starting on that scale-up journey that you've just been through?
Well, geez, it seems a long time ago since I raised a Series A. And there are a number of things that I would have done differently, but a number of things which I got right too. I would always advocate running a narrow process, and not taking 101 meetings with 101 VCs, because I mean, there are plenty of VCs out there who will take lots of calls with you. It's part of their thing. They have SDRs just like, or sales reps just like everyone else, and they'll happily take up lots and lots of time. I think running a narrow process is a very important thing, because when you're doing a fundraising round, your eyes are not focused on the business. And as a founder and leader in small startup companies, your best move is to focus on growing the business. So running a narrow process reduces the opportunity cost of fundraising. Number 2, make sure you get the best advisors which you can possibly afford, be it investment bankers or lawyers or tax people. Getting stuff set up early and making sure that your interests and the investor's interests are aligned and not weighted to one party is hugely important. It adds to the transaction costs, but in the long run, it's absolutely worth it. And then thirdly, don't worry about it too much. I mean, I think when we did our seed round, so prior to Albion joining, I was really stressed out about it. And it was my first time doing a material funding round at that point. I was like, oh man, this is going wrong, that's going wrong, blah 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 blah. The thing is, VCs do this all the time. This is their business. If you bring on good lawyers, they do it all the time. Focus on what you're best at and let the experts do what they're best at, and just don't worry about it. What's meant to be is meant to be. I remember a couple of years ago, we were trying to bring on some venture debt, in the depths of COVID, and we were going through that process, and we were all gung-ho, and 8 days prior to close, they pulled out. And at first, I was really annoyed about it, and I phoned them up, and I gave them a piece of my mind, and I don't think they'll be on my Christmas card list moving forward. In the long run, though, it didn't matter. We found another way. We worked it out. Part of the whole entrepreneurial journey is sometimes shit happens, and the problem ain't the problem. The problem is how you cope with it. And deals come and deals go. Find one which works, and if it stops working, find a different one.
Parry, thank you for all the insights. Lovely speaking to you as always. So thank you very much.
Thanks.